The phrase kept coming up again and again, delivered calmly, almost defensively, every time a camera was turned toward the bench. This was the coach's call. Not a committee, not politics, not ratings, not shoe deals, just a decision. And yet, nothing in modern basketball ignites controversy faster than who makes Team USA and who doesn't. Because when the roster is trimmed, what's really being cut isn't just players. It's expectations, careers, legacies, sometimes even entire narratives fans have already written in their heads. Every Olympic or World Cup cycle follows the same emotional rhythm. The preliminary pool looks stacked, too stacked. Social media celebrates the depth. Analysts debate combinations. Fans argue hypotheticals. And then reality arrives. A final roster has to fit on one page. 12 names, sometimes fewer. That's when the outrage begins, and the phrase coach's call suddenly becomes both shield and sword. The uncomfortable truth is that international basketball isn't the NBA with flags on the jerseys. It's a different game with different physics. Shorter rotations, tighter margins, less time to experiment. Coaches aren't building brands. They're building systems that must survive single-elimination chaos against teams that have played together for a decade. Chemistry matters more than star power. Fit matters more than popularity. And ego, no matter how decorated, becomes a liability the moment it disrupts execution. This is where most fans lose the plot. They assume roster cuts are punishments or snubs. In reality, they're often acknowledgments of mismatch. A player can be elite and still wrong for the role. Team USA doesn't need 12 alpha scorers. It needs specialists who understand when not to touch the ball. It needs defenders willing to chase screens for 40 minutes without a highlight. It needs veterans who can sit for an entire quarter and re-enter cold without sulking. And that's where some of the biggest names quietly fall out of favor. The coach's call usually begins with one question: who closes games? Not who sells jerseys. Not who trends on Twitter. Who can be trusted when the margin is 2 points and the opponent has no fear? International teams don't panic against American stars anymore. They hunt mismatches. They exploit switches. They punish indecision. Coaches know this. That's why roster cuts often target redundancy. 3 scorers who all need the ball. One of them is gone. 2 centers who can't guard in space. One doesn't make it. A guard who can score 30 but struggles navigating off-ball screens. Suddenly, the resume doesn't matter. There's also the pace issue. FIBA basketball is unforgiving. Fewer timeouts, less freedom of movement, more physicality. The court feels smaller. Defensive 3 seconds doesn't exist. A player who thrives in NBA spacing can look ordinary when driving lanes disappear. Coaches see this in camp scrimmages long before fans do. A player might dominate open runs but struggle in structured sets. That's not a failure. It's information. And information leads to cuts. Then there's defense, the least glamorous reason stars get left home. International basketball exposes defensive habits brutally. One missed rotation becomes 3 points. One lazy closeout becomes momentum. Coaches don't care how many points someone averages in January if they can't execute a weak side stunt in August. Team USA has lost games because of this before. They've been humbled by teams that simply played harder, smarter, and more connected. Those losses live in the coach's memory. So when they say coach's call, what they often mean is we're not repeating history. Another factor fans rarely consider is role acceptance. The hardest adjustment for NBA stars isn't the competition, it's the sacrifice. Going from first option to fourth requires emotional intelligence. Some players embrace it instantly. Others nod publicly and resist subconsciously. Coaches notice. Body language matters. Huddles matter. So does practice intensity when minutes aren't guaranteed. A player who dominates drills but disengages when running the scout team is sending a message, even if they don't realize it. This is why veterans sometimes survive cuts that shock casual viewers. Not because they're better, but because they're dependable. They know when to cut, when to screen, when to talk on defense, when to calm the group after a bad whistle. International tournaments are short. There's no time to teach these things. Coaches choose familiarity over potential because potential doesn't help when the quarter ends in 90 seconds. There's also the uncomfortable political layer, though it's not the one people think. It's not about shoe brands or market size. It's about trust. Coaching staffs are built from networks. Assistants recommend players they've coached before. Analytics teams flag tendencies they've studied for years. A player who has been in the system before holds an advantage. They know the terminology. They understand the expectations. That doesn't make the process unfair. It makes it efficient. And efficiency wins medals. The media often frames cuts as insults. Disrespect. Snub. How could they leave him off? But those narratives ignore context. They ignore the fact that Team USA isn't an all-star game. It's a job, and not every elite worker fits every assignment. A construction crew doesn't hire 12 architects. A surgical team doesn't need 12 surgeons. Balance matters. Some cuts are also about future-proofing. Coaches aren't just selecting for one tournament. They're thinking about continuity. Who can anchor the next cycle? Who can grow into leadership? Who can survive roster turnover? Sometimes that means choosing a younger, less accomplished player who fits a long-term vision. Fans hate this logic. Coaches live by it. In recent years, the margin for error has vanished. The rest of the world has caught up. Talent gaps have closed. Schemes are sophisticated. Players who grew up in the same club system now star in the NBA and return home with chemistry intact. Team USA can no longer overwhelm opponents by sheer athleticism. It must outthink them. That requires discipline. And discipline requires cuts that feel ruthless. When a coach steps to the microphone and says this was the coach's call, it's often after weeks of internal debate. Film sessions, metrics, practice tape, medical evaluations, conditioning reports, fit simulations. It's rarely impulsive, and it's never personal, even when it feels that way to the player involved. For the players who don't make it, the disappointment is real. Representing your country matters. Being told you're not the right piece hurts, especially when you know your talent belongs on that stage. But those players don't vanish. Many return stronger, more adaptable, more aware of what the international game demands. Some come back and become indispensable. Others realize their prime contributions exist elsewhere. Neither outcome diminishes their greatness. Fans often forget that cuts don't define careers. They define moments. History remembers medals, not training camps. And behind every controversial omission is a quiet understanding inside the locker room. Someone had to go. There is no perfect roster, only trade-offs. The coach's call is rarely about who is best. It's about who fits best right now, who complements, who sacrifices, who defends, who listens, who survives pressure without needing validation. That's not something a box score can capture. It's something coaches feel in the flow of practice, in the tone of communication, in the response to adversity. That's why outrage fades but decisions endure. Once the games begin, the conversation shifts. Rotations tighten, roles clarify, and suddenly the absence of one player matters less than the cohesion of the group. Winning quiets everything. Losing reopens every wound. But the logic remains the same. This was the coach's call isn't an excuse. It's an admission of responsibility. It means someone owned the choice. And in international basketball, where reputations crumble in 40 minutes, that ownership is everything. Because when the ball is tipped, there are no snubs. There are only results.